Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Check Me. I want to talk about pretty much the college football rankings, um, the movement that happened pretty much in the college football rankings. We had a couple teams go down in the top 10. Some teams kind of sneak up into the top 10. I want to talk about why Alabama has pretty much been in the 11th place. They have not moved Alabama. The reasoning behind it and why I don't think it's justified whether they stay at number 11. But top 10 rankings: Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, Washington, Oklahoma, Penn State, Texas, Oklahoma, and Oregon and North Carolina. So you got Georgia at number one spot, Michigan at number two, Ohio State number three, Florida State at four, Washington at five, Oklahoma at six, Penn State at seven. Now the next two teams are one loss teams, so Texas and then Oregon, and then North Carolina at 10, and then Alabama. So you only have one team who's undefeated that's in the top 25 outside the top 10, and that's simply Air Force. But essentially, what they're saying is, hey, the top four teams are unchanged. Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State are unchanged. The question is, do you put a if do you is a one as an undefeated Penn State team or a one loss Oregon Pac-12 team better than the Alabama? No, they're not. Better than the Ole Miss? No, they're not. USC has a one loss team, but they drop all the way to 18th after losing. But Oregon only dropped a couple spots because I guess they feel Oregon's still strong. We know the Pac-12 is not the strongest division, but we know that they're going to beat up on each other. Oregon and Washington still have games to play against each other. Still have to play USC. I can easily see them losing one of those games and USC winning. Oklahoma, the undefeated Big 12 team, is sitting there at 6. They want to make the Big 10. I just don't understand why they want to make football even, and they want to think that it's even. But for the past since 2013, we haven't had a team outside of the SEC and the ACC win. The SEC has been represented consistently throughout there with the strongest teams. So I say that because a one-loss SEC team is stronger than any other team in any other conference. Plain and simple. The Big Ten gets smacked up every single year when they play a SEC school. And they got smacked up when they played Clemson as well too. It's a mirage of the Big Ten being strong, but in actuality, it's not really strong. But you got Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State all in the Big Ten, all going to play each other. North Carolina crept up at crept up in there. I think they'll lose. They have to play Florida State, so one of them will drop. The question will be, where is Alabama moving this? Alabama, who literally has been in that 11th spot for the past, I think, 3 weeks. They had a strong performance, but they didn't finish the game well against I forgot who they played. Arkansas. That was a big concern, probably for the voters. Does the AP 25 really matter? No, because when the college football playoff starts to come out, we'll see a little bit more what they're thinking. In the AFCA poll, they have Alabama at 8, tied with Texas. I think that Alabama. Here's why you put Texas. Here's why you put Texas over Alabama. Alabama doesn't look necessarily different from the time they played Texas, and they did for a second, but the way they led up in the second half didn't give probably the voters enough to say, hey, you know what? Here's a change. Oklahoma, who probably will have to play Texas again in the Big 12 championship game, Texas may be able to get their mark, but if Oklahoma goes undefeated, they're automatically in. Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan are beat up on each other. I think Ohio State's the strongest team out of that bunch. So we'll probably see Ohio State, Georgia, and then the last two spots are on lock. I think that we're going to see Georgia and Ohio State, that's their first top two win, and then the rest barring any injuries, the rest is going to be unlocked. It's going to be open, pretty much unlocked. But I don't see a Pac-12 team really sneaking in there. I think a Big 12 team is going to have to, either it's Oklahoma or Texas. If Texas continues to win and in the Big 12 championship game, and Oklahoma, continues to win. If Oklahoma loses to Texas in the Big 12 championship game, they get in. If Texas beats Oklahoma beats Texas, they get in. So a Big 12 team is pretty much, if both these teams go undefeated, are pretty much going to be in there. Then the question is, what do? You put another SEC team in there? Do you put another Big 10 team in there? And if Alabama finishes strong and goes to the Alabama's best bet is to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. I don't foresee on the schedule where they can lose a game, but that's their best bet. You have to beat Georgia, and if they beat Georgia, do you put a one-loss Georgia team in there over a one-loss Georgia team in there over a one-loss Big 12, Big 10, or Big 10 team? Right? It depends on the game as well too, if it's close or not. But Georgia, believe it or not, if they lose the SEC championship game, they're going to be in there. So that's why there hasn't been movement for Alabama over the past couple of weeks. LSU's creeping up there. They went 3 spots. USC had the biggest drop in the poll. The biggest jump were Oregon State, LSU, and Notre Dame jumped up 6 spots after beating. I forgot who it was they played after beating SC. I don't think Notre Dame is good. They're playing Pac-12 opponents. Very rarely do they the SEC is the standard, and for you to actually say, "Hey, look, you're actually legit," you have to beat good teams. If you notice over the past couple of years, they scheduled their pretty much games, and they have not played an SEC opponent. All the opponents they play are outside the SEC because they know if they lost to a mediocre SEC opponent, which they probably will, it will hurt them in the rankings because then you can't put them over any SEC opponent. So they're very strategic and smart because the past 3 years they've been playing Big 12, ACC, Big East opponents, and they really haven't played any. I'm trying to look to see when's the last time they played an SEC opponent. The last time I see they played an SEC opponent was in the Rose Bowl by Capital One, and they got destroyed 31-14 by Alabama. But they don't put SEC. Notre Dame doesn't put SEC opponents on their schedule for a reason, because they played Georgia. They lost in the last time they did that. They played Georgia. They lost in 2019, and it wasn't the best Georgia team at the time, right? I'm going back to 2018. They played one SEC opponent since 2018. They're very smart with not putting SEC on their schedule. Now they did play South Carolina in a bowl game, right? And they beat them. So they're 1-1 against SEC, but their regular season schedule they have not put them on the schedule because they know what's going to happen. So Notre Dame, the idea we want Ohio State, Michigan, we want these teams in the Midwest to be the best and do well. But when it comes down to a national championship, they're just not good. They're not the top. They're not part of the top 4 teams. You can easily pick 4 teams in the SEC, and I'll take the top 4 SEC teams against the field, right? If you take the top 4 SEC teams and almost every year, I would take them against any other opponent, any other top 4 opponent, the best opponent in the league, in college football. And I look at the SEC, and I'm not being biased. It's just what history shows. Like I want to be, me being biased would be off. But what history shows, that's what history shows. I'm taking Georgia, Alabama, LSU, and Ole Miss over the next top 4 opponents. And to argue against me with that, you have to be completely out of your mind. So this is why we haven't seen movement in the rankings. I think next week we have some more big games kind of coming up. Let me pull this up. The next week, if we look at some of the top games that kind of come up, because we're starting to get into, I think they released the college football playoff very, very, very soon. Let me pull this up here. I need to go to scores. But if you look at the top, you got Penn State, Ohio State next week. Penn State's traveling to Ohio State. Penn State has not played anybody at all. Their confidence is riding high. So to go into Columbus and try to still win, interesting. I mean, Penn State's schedule: West Virginia, Delaware, Illinois, Iowa, Northwestern, and Massachusetts. Right, they're going to play three ranked opponents. So if they lose, they should drop heavy in the polls. because they're only playing 3 ranked opponents. And Iowa's on the crevices. They were 24. The Ohio State and Michigan, right? Even if they beat one of those teams, I don't think they should be in the top 4. So you got to win both of them. Then you have a big game. You have, where is it? At the time, I don't think Iowa was even ranked. You have Duke. Florida State's going to be a big test for Florida State. I think Florida State easily wins that one. You got Utah, USC, and of course I think Alabama is on their going into their bye. Washington, Arizona State, and UCLA and Stanford. So not actually this week, not really a big, huge week. I think Ole Miss, Auburn could be a trap game for Ole Miss. Texas he goes to Houston, plays Houston. I mean, that's a cupcake game for them. So, I lied. Alabama and Tennessee play. Now, if Alabama beats Tennessee, another ranked opponent, this is going to help their schedule, right? They should move up in the rankings regardless of who won before because they're beating a ranked opponent. So, say for example, Ohio State beats Penn State, and then Alabama beats Tennessee. Alabama should move up in the rankings. Same. I think that goes as well for. I think it goes as well for where is it for Duke. If Duke beats Florida State, then you should. What do you? Because they're Duke's 16 and Florida State's 4. Do you just swap them? So these are some of the things I think the committee's having to struggle with. But the SEC conference is the standard, and if you win the SEC and a one loss team in the SEC is better than an undefeated team in any other conference.